most people bet against us. Like, I don't know, we're always the underdogs.
제가 프로게이머 하기 전에 저도 그런 스포츠들을 볼 때 약간 계속 이기는 팀보다는 도전하는 팀? 그런 팀을 응원하긴 했거든요, 저도.
Who doesn't want to see an upset happen? Who doesn't want to see an end to the SKT era finally? Who doesn't want to finally not see SKT as the world champion?
근데 제가 그 계속 이기는 팀원의 일원 중 한 명으로서 개인적으로는 절대 지고 싶지 않고 그냥 계속 이기기 싶기 때문에 최대한 이겨야죠.
We are about to write history if we win against SKT, and no one can take that away from us.
3, 2, 1, go!
SKT가 8강에서 떨어지게 된다면 엄청난 굴욕감과 타격을 입을 것 같아요. 다시 디펜딩 챔피언으로 거듭나는 게 목표입니다.
Hello and welcome back to the beautiful Guangzhou, China. Here you see Misfits, who will be stepping off the butts, getting ready for their fight of their lives in this tournament up against the reigning champions in SK Telecom, making their way to the stadium, or the stage rather, just moments ago. You can hear the crowd cheering behind me. Lots of fandom in this building, looking at those reigning champions, as well as some Misfits fans out there, people hoping for that upset, however unlikely it might be. Let's remember that last night, Samsung Galaxy rocked Pick'ems across the world, dominating against Longzhu, but now it's time to throw it down to Rendong on stage to introduce the team.
伴随着大家的呐喊声，接下来让我们请出的是2017英雄联盟全球总决赛4分之一决赛第2天的2支战队，欢迎战队登场。
First team out here, Misfits, the challengers
首先，让我
tonight.
们请出的是红方，来自于欧洲 LCS 赛区的 Misfits。
Second seed out of Europe. They shocked the world with their run through the group stage, qualifying through and now challenging the reigning champions.
上路 Alphari， 打野 Max Law， 中路 Power of Evil， 下路 Hesama， 辅助 Ignar。 同样欢迎他们的教练 Jose 以及替补辅助 Hiva。再一次感谢 Misfits 战队的到来。接下来，让我们请出的是蓝方卫冕冠军 SKT。
Three-time world champions, two-time defending champions, perhaps the greatest, not perhaps, they are the greatest team to ever play League of Legends.
上路 Huni， 打野 Peanut， 中路 Faker， 下路 Ben， 辅助 Wolf， 同样欢迎他们的教练 Koma 以及替补打野 Blank。让我们再一次掌声欢迎 SKT。 英雄智出传奇，比赛现在开始。
A dominating 3-0 performance out of Samsung Galaxy, taking down Longzhou just yesterday. SK Telecom and Misfits Gaming take to the stage for our second quarterfinal. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm James Dash Patterson. I'm joined by this talented trio, Indiana Frosker and Black, Chris, Papa Smithy Smith, and Joshua Jat. Leisman, yesterday's series was absolutely crazy. Of course, went contrary to all of the predictions. How excited are we to get our second quarterfinal under the way?
I mean, it's very exciting. It would also be a massive upset if anything other than the expected result happens. I mean, it's SK Telecom T1. We're used to seeing this team in the final.
Very much so. Well, we're not the only team bringing you the action today. Our international broadcast partners are at the ready to bring the games to regions all across the globe. Here you see some shots of their different casting booths here set up in the beautiful Guangzhou Gymnasium. And as we gear up for our next series, let's go ahead and pull up the bracket. Today's match pits SK Telecom T1 versus Misfits Gaming, with EU's Fnatic loading onto the Rift opposite RNG on Saturday. Then North America's Cloud9 hopes to upset the LPL's Team WE and earn that last spot in Shanghai. But we can't jump into today's series without acknowledging Samsung Galaxy's huge upset win over Longzhou just yesterday.
Yeah, and Longzhou was the favorite from that side of the bracket to reach the final. Even looking at Pick'em, 66% of people had Longzhou appearing in the final. But as far as their issues coming into Worlds, they didn't matter until yesterday, because during the group stage, it didn't matter that they weren't playing tank top laners, that they had 3 Worlds rookies, but it was all exploited by Samsung, who I feel like played very well.
Yeah, Samsung's preparation, I think, was super notable about this series. Their ability to come in, absolutely have a great read, understand what they needed to do and how it would fit against their opponents. It's the sort of thing they've done in fits and spurts. They don't always manage it, but in this big knockout best of 5, they certainly pulled it off.
And frankly, coming into the very early stages of the tournament, before we saw Samsung start to stumble, Crumbs and I did have a conversation on desk where we're like, Samsung might be favorites to win the tournament. It makes sense in a meta that is all about team fighting, that is very slow to build, that maybe they wouldn't be punished. Suddenly we saw Longzhou sprinting off the finish line and just demolishing teams, and we saw really the two styles clash yesterday. That very fast, aggressive style versus the slow, patient, and Samsung won out through that great draft and the ability to absorb so much of that pressure.
Yeah, well, I feel like Samsung also did a great job finding early game proactivity. Ambition didn't get a first blood or assist in 5 group stage games, but he was all over the place with 4 kills pre-15 minutes in the first 2 games against Longzhou. So very much I feel like Samsung found a way to bridge to their great team play.
Experience and adaptability key in winning that series yesterday. We'll see how experience plays into today's series as Misfits, a novice squad to the world stage, takes on SK Telecom T1 of all teams.
I do want to take a moment, though, to really celebrate Misfits' victory, or pathway, excuse me, not victory yet, they haven't won it yet, but pathway to this giant mountain that they now have to climb in SKT. A lot of people look at them as like the fairy tale run, but to me, it's almost more like the Odyssey. You know, they're not this carriage that is going to turn into a pumpkin. Yes, we're kind of waiting for midnight to strike, but it's this idea that domestically, they already made that great climb. You know, they took down Unicorns of Love, they took down Fnatic. These were all upsets. Yes, they lost to the Kings of Europe, but they came out in a group with TSM and Flash Wolves. #1 seed from LMS as well as North America were in there. At this point, they've already proven that they're a good team, and they didn't just wander into this quarterfinal by accident.
And I do feel, though, on the other side with SKT, their results didn't really show the full story. They actually started 3-0 and then went 2-1, which is the reverse. Usually they're slow to warm up. I think in terms of gameplay and in terms of reading the meta, that was still there. I still feel like first week SKT was playing League of Legends very different to second week SKT. In the second week, they gambled more on Huni, this man who hadn't played the majority of the summer season, really setting up Huni in particular to take a lot of the mid game, draft the Jace, draft 4, lane presence, and playing around a strong top lane after having kind of 3 losing lanes at times helped them overall.
Yeah, and I think if you were to put on your tunnel vision goggles and say, let's just look at exactly the group stage games that is agnostic of opponents, you'd be like, man, Misfits has an insanely good early game. 1,000 gold up on average of 50 minutes. SKT's early game is really bad. They've been down 800 gold at 50 minutes. Misfits could win the early game and smash SKT, but then you take the blinders off and you realize that SKT has lost 3 games in the history of group stage. 4 years worth of group stage, 23-3. Misfits lost 3 games in 2 weeks, right? The difference between the history of these 2 teams is so massive. And yes, SKT's early game was weak in that group stage, but this is a whole different ballgame once you get onto the quarterfinal stage.
For me, it's also really important to nail down exactly where SKT are finding these big comebacks. It's one thing to step back and look at, those crazy initiations where Wolf finds, 5 people with Rakan, but like what led to that? And it's their defensive vision. The fact that they never let up on that really strong control. So even when they're falling behind, they still find these pockets of fog of war where they can trap you. Misfits, on the other hand, even when they do get those massive leads, we saw it in the Flash Wolves game. They kind of get stalled out. They're not playing very well on vision. They just kind of wander into some of these team fights, and I think that's where the big mismatch will happen between these teams, even if Misfits does get that lead.
I think those defensive fundamentals you talk about, the vision, playing from behind, which they certainly showed they can do, will only serve them to really be a baseline here. I feel like we've seen kind of the lowest ceiling possible for SK Telecom at Worlds. It's from building from there compared to what Samsung had to build from is a much easier process. So I think obviously we were kind of shocked by how good Samsung was yesterday. I think if SKT build on that decent fundamental, they're going to reach a level we haven't seen from them maybe all year.
But if we're talking about potential mismatches, we've got to talk about perhaps the most vulnerable player on SKT in Peanut, matching up against the early game catalyst for Misfits here in Maxlore.
I mean, the thing is yes, Peanut has been a little bit non-existent in the early game for SKT, but he is placing a lot of that vision that we just talked about that are so crucial to their comebacks. On the other side, it's a guy like Maxlore, and even with the the Peanut Blank, that should just be their couple's name. Even with Blank trying to download Maxlore in the back, it's actually very difficult. This guy doesn't just rely on tendencies. He changes not just game to game, but minute to minute in his creative pathing about where he's playing around his team's win condition.
You know what does change from game to game? Whether they're playing Peanut or Blank. Peanut will start game one. This is always their strategy. They rely on Peanut. He can be an aggressive weapon. We haven't seen it at all at World's group stage. We know that he can adapt. We're surprised to see Ambition. It'll be no surprise to see Peanut adapt here. They also have Blank, who has that really big advantage. He kind of plays with map packs because he can watch game one, sit there with his coach, observe what happens in the game, then use the information he gains to make smart pathing choices, which is his best way to play. Ironically, the role that Bengi was playing for the team last year.
All right, well, with all this in mind, it's come to that time where I ask you for your predictions. Do the reigning champions in SK Telecom T1 or the newcomers in Misfits take the series, and who moves on to Shanghai? I'll remind you that yesterday, all 3 of my analysts went with the expected, and then that definitely didn't happen. Take it away.
Yesterday, those 2 teams had a massive history with each other. They definitely knew how to prepare. This time around, Misfits are, again, standing at the base of a mountain and looking up at an impossible task. I think this is SKT 3-0. I think it's a very easy, clean 3-0.
Okay, Papa Smithy?
I'm right there with you, Frascura, and I got a similar analogy. I think we did see lightning strike yesterday, but there were those very small clouds surrounding. You didn't see them. They certainly weren't overwhelming the sky. You thought it was Longzhou. It ended up being a Samsung day. It's a pristine blue summer's day here today. I think SK Telecom T1, clean 3-0.
No second lightning strike. Jat?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly difficult to look at this matchup and not say SKT 3-0, based on the history of them in group stage and making it all the way to the World Final. And when I look at SKT in the group stage versus bracket stage, they play every group stage game like game 1 of a best of 5, where they're feeling out their opponents, seeing the best they got, and then just playing a generic strategy. And more often than not, SKT's final game in the series is the most convincing one. So I do think it's possible, but not probable, that Misfits take a game in this series early on, when they're hitting SKT with everything they got, and before the SKT that we know just morphs into the team that counters everything Misfits wants to do.
Overwhelming support for the 3-0 here in favor of SK Telecom, and Jat sort of preempted the question here, but I will press you. Where does Misfits win, if at all, one game or more to move on to the semifinals?
For me, it's specifically the bot lane. I don't know if SKT will make adaptations in their draft phase, but they have been predominantly about the Twitch pick. Maybe they start going towards that Caitlyn, maybe they mix things up, but Hansama on the other side is going for the Xayah. Ignar is looking for the Thresh, the Blitzcrank. They can certainly run a kill lane and really start to cause problems for Bang and Wolf and snowball the game from there specifically.
Yeah, and I feel like the mythos of SKT makes us think that them losing a game is impossible in these situations, but it has happened before for sure. And then we look at the way Misfits plays the early game. There is a world in which they can get a few games, but it's like, would you rather fight against a 1,500-pound grizzly bear, which would be SKT last year. And then this year, it's, oh yeah, this is the weakest they've ever looked. There's still a grizzly bear, and you're still trying to fight it with your bare hands. Like, sure, there are cases where it's happened.
Right.
The guy has beaten the grizzly bear or run away and made it jump off a cliff.
Fingers crossed.
I've gone way too far with this analogy.
I like it, though. I like it. Well, my analysts are not alone because 98% of all pick'ems have SKT taking the win and heading to the semifinals. And for what it's worth, only one player in all pick'ems still has a perfect bracket, and that player from LAN chose SKT to take the series today. Good on you, mate. You're doing well. Now, before we jump into the match, Misfits, mid laner rather, Power of Evil shares what it's like to go against the Demon King himself in the quarterfinals.
There's like this one YouTube video.
No ulti on that Alistar, they're going for it. Then no, another one. 4 kills now for Power of Evil.
And Faker, you can see him in the camera. He's like, oh, did you guys see that? Like, this was really good, you know? And seeing this from such a, I would say, like, insane and strong person, like, gives me a lot of confidence. He could see enough VODs from me, he could learn enough from me, so now he should experience me on the Rift.
Excitement and passion from Power of Evil, and we hope to see that from Misfits in-game. Hello, everyone. I'm Riving DeBizen III, joined by this dapper duo of Martin DeFicio Lung and Isaac Gazelle Cummings Bentley. Gentlemen, you're 3 inches, 4 inches taller than me. I look up to you. How you feeling today? Tell me. Give me some answers.
I'm feeling good, and I gotta say, you're looking pretty dapper yourself, Riv.
Thank you so
I just
much.
want to fight a grizzly bear right now.
I know.
Show it can happen, actually.
The whole
Misfits
thing
can
was
maybe
you're
do
not
it.
supposed to fight a grizzly bear.
Oh, but I can probably beat it.
Okay.
It's all right. They are a lighter grizzly bear this year, as Jat said, so possibly Misfits has the way to get in there with their confidence. It's something I have seen from this team that it's more than confidence. It's an all-around mentality, because when confidence is knocked down, you find yourself in that spot of not talking to your team,
Right.
not being able to call things. I feel like Misfits has the ability to get around that, and they can use that against SK.